Welcome to Dominate Your Day podcast. This is the podcast that adds value to leaders who want to make a difference in the workplace. We believe each person is unique and has a purpose they can live out every day and make an impact in the world. Here at Dominate Your Day podcast, we hear stories from leaders who have used their unique talents to transform themselves and their companies from the inside out.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Dominate Your Day. I'm excited today to have Elyse Lupin with us. And Elyse is a marketer and she's got a great background and she's doing some fantastic things right now with her clients. So I want to introduce Elyse and have her share a little bit about her background and how you got to where you are right now, Elyse. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Sure. So you've got your own marketing agency now. So tell us, how did you get there? I mean, it sounds like you started right at the Today Show right out of college and
I did.
kind of worked your way up. So tell us about that.
Yeah. I don't know that I ever, no path is straight, right? So
No.
I've had lots of different jobs that led me here, but yeah, no, I started right out of college as a NBC page, like you said, and I worked on the Today Show and a couple other places in New York, and then I wound up coming back to Philadelphia, where my family is. Every time I leave, I come back. It's sort of a Philly thing. We all do that.
Yes.
Um, so I've worked at a bunch of different major corporations. Other than NBC, I worked for Disney, I worked for Comcast, I've worked for a bunch of different corporations. And what I didn't realize at the time was that I was gaining knowledge in marketing in different areas at each place. I don't think I intentionally did that. I think it was just kind of what jobs were open and what I found interesting. Um, and so I started Elysium Marketing Group 9 years ago now. And
Congrats. That's
thank
9 years. Yeah.
yeah, it's crazy
And,
that
and
I
you've
can't
got
believe
some
10
kids in there too, right? You got some
Well,
like
that's
had
exactly, and
kids.
that was part of the catalyst for starting Elysium was I had my son who will be 10 soon. And I didn't see him a whole lot, and I was commuting into the city, and I was at a job that I really didn't love. And so sort of the combination of all of that pushed me, and a mentor, of course, you always have people who have to cheerlead you a little bit into
Yes.
starting my own thing. And I kind of looked back and saw, okay, I have the marketing skills to be able to get this going. And then 9 years ago, though, I didn't know exactly. I knew I worked in marketing my whole career and that I was going to start a marketing agency, but it kind of takes a life of its own a little bit. I had worked in strategy, so I knew that was going to be part of the business, but I felt it was so important that branding, um, you can put together a good marketing strategy, but if you send it to a bad website or bad branding, it's not going to work. So I feel really strongly like both sides of the business for marketing is really important. So that's why I set up the agency like that. And I've been really, really lucky because I have phenomenal designers who work for me. I love
Great.
branding, but you don't want to see what I could do. They're amazing. Um,
Mhm.
and so, yeah, so we've been doing this for 9 years, and now we specialize in food and franchise. So we work with lots of restaurant groups and lots of different franchises in lots of different capacities. So it's fun.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of females that listen to our show, and they're corporate leaders. They're working on their own personal brand. They're also founders of businesses just like you, and they are coaches who are trying to get themselves established and create their brand. And everything is a commodity now, right? So,
Mm.
how do you really stand? As a difference maker. And I love the fact that you talked about focusing on your niche with franchises and with food and beverage and getting really into that niche. How did that happen?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And honestly, it's probably my biggest learning of last year. Um, we've really taken off, and it's because we niched a couple of years ago and really have leaned into that. And I'm a big reader, so I had always read like other agency owner books and other marketing, and everything I read said you have to niche, and I was petrified of that, especially because half
Mm,
of our niche is food. And so when I was going to do it for the first time, it was right before the pandemic, and we lost a lot of our food clients for the time being. And so I thought, I can't do this. Like, I'm going to have no clients. But we worked with a couple franchise clients, some in food, some not. And it's just the franchise industry is really interesting because the people are really entrepreneurial. And
Mhm.
every time I would go to a franchise event, I would learn new things. I would meet really interesting people. I would have a good time. And so once we were really successful with a couple of the franchise groups that we were working with, that's when I kind of had an aha moment of food and franchise. There's, a lot of overlap there. And so if we do food and franchise, food we've been doing since we started. That's just something that we've had lots of restaurant groups since the beginning.
Okay.
Franchise is something we started doing well a couple years ago. And so if I marry the two, that can be our niche. And it's turned out to work extremely well. I wish we niched earlier, but you kind of got to learn as you
That's
go.
okay.
So,
Yeah, and I think as a founder, you probably have gone through a lot of pivots and test
mhm.
and learns, and as a marketer. So, what have been your biggest lessons as you've been growing the business, as you've been adding your team and bringing on people to serve your clients? What have been your biggest lessons as you've been on this journey?
Yeah, I think the biggest lesson is finding good people and the right people. And
Mhm.
so obviously they have to be good at their skill set. If I'm hiring someone to do SEO, they have to be experts in that area. But then the other part of it is, are they a good fit for our team? So I do think that hiring the right people, Elysium would not be where we're at right now without my amazing team. I'm the leader and I'm the founder, but we are a team and the team is super strong. And so definitely hiring the right people would be one of the biggest lessons. Um, Another would be, niche earlier, which I talked
Mhm.
about already, but I'm like, whoops, should have done that. Um, and another, I think, is kind of treat your people the way that you want to be treated, like the whole golden rule thing. I have two small children, so I can't always work 9 to 5. Or today, for example,
Mhm.
I have my kids' um, parent teacher conferences. So I'll be leaving earlier and then, everybody else, and I'll go to their parent teacher conference, but then I will 100%, come back onto my computer later on tonight. And, as the owner, you're kind of working nonstop, but I love it,
Mhm.
so I don't mind. But I think I would be a big hypocrite if I'm doing this, but if someone else is like, "Hey, I have a doctor's appointment, can I work from home today?" If I were to say no to that, like that's just not how it should be. So I
Mhm.
definitely, as a leader, am someone who, tries to put myself in my team's shoes and figure out they're humans as well. So how can I make their life easier? They're doing a good job for me. I want to do a good job for them as well.
I love that. I love that you talked about building culture, finding the right people, and then listening to their needs
For sure.
and creating a culture flexibility so that people could get their work done in the time that they could get it done. But as long as the work gets done, right? This is the new mantra since COVID, and
Yeah.
since hybrid is here to stay. I know your team works mostly in the office because of your setup, but tell us what you've learned as a working mom. I know you're passionate about helping other working moms and helping them balance. And how do you keep from getting the burnout? What do you do? Because that's the one of the biggest challenges I hear from a lot of my working moms.
Yeah. So I am super passionate about this. And I think the reason why is when I had my son, I was working, in the corporate world and I legitimately didn't understand how people do it. I think now, it's almost 10 years later,
Mhm.
there's a lot more resources and people talk about it a lot more. But just 10 years ago, no one really talked about how hard it was. And I found that really weird. Um, so I think now, though my kids are getting a little bit older, it's a little bit different. I do think when you're working and they're in the baby phases is probably the hardest, just from the
Mhm.
standpoint of, I didn't take any time off with my daughter when she was born, and I didn't even bring her up yet. But
Wow.
but that was, 2.5 years into my business, and I did this to myself, and I don't recommend this. I was so petrified of losing clients that I literally birthed her and just went back to work.
Oh
And,
gosh.
anyone who's had a child, like,
Mhm.
your body's not feeling
Mhm.
particularly great. You're not sleeping. I had a toddler at the time too. Um, and so I think I should have been a little bit kinder with myself. I actually feel like looking back, my clients would have been okay if I took a little bit longer and, um, you
Mm.
know, I don't know what I was trying to prove. I was trying to make sure that they knew that I was loyal, but at the same time, I feel like that wasn't really fair to my child. So that's another lesson I would say, that you can't get that time back. And so I do feel pretty strongly like it is what I did and it worked out fine. But I do wish I kind of took a little bit more time with the baby and some healing before I just like, my team makes fun of
Yeah.
me because I was getting wheeled in. She was breached. She was a C-section. And I was getting wheeled in and texting them like, did this happen? Did that happen? They were like, aren't you having a baby? And I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
anyway, did this happen? Did that happen? I was a little crazy. So
Mhm. Yeah, and now it's like it's okay. It's that permission slip. And I do think that came from the boomer generation and came from you got to work hard and superwoman because you know my mom, she was a working mom and an ad agency and she never could stop. And I always said, "Okay, when I grow up I'm not going to." Of course, I
yeah.
was a working mom, you know.
Yeah.
My daughter is an entrepreneur and she's got 3 kids and she's doing it, but she's blending it all. So we have
And I'm
blenders
trying,
and
COVID actually helped
splinters.
me. Yeah, believe it or
Yeah.
not,
Yeah.
COVID made a huge difference. I was on this weird train of just go, go, like get
Yeah.
everything done. You got to grow the agency, you got to, be the superwoman, whatever. And then when COVID happened, the kids were home. I was lucky because my kids actually went to school for part of the time, but they were home for
That's
part of
great.
it. And it sort of forced me to look at these beautiful children that you're hiding in your office from. And so
Mm.
I think the combination of that, plus also losing some of my really big clients during COVID, it forced me to kind of be like, look, we're okay. I lost the big clients and
Mhm.
Elysium is still doing fine. And pay attention to these beautiful children that are in front of you. And there were times where I was like, can I just have a meeting without someone coming in and like crying or asking for food or something? And that part was a little bit challenging, but it opened my eyes to everything will be okay. You can spend quality time with your kids and then go and spend time on work instead of, I was so just like tunnel vision, grow the business, which I'm also not proud of. But so COVID in a way was a good thing for me and a bad thing, but a good learning thing for sure.
Sure. I think there was so many things that changed in the workplace from that. One
Yeah,
of them is mental well-being, mental health. And right
for
now we
sure.
know like 7 out of 10 people right now are suffering in the workplace because they haven't taken time to assess and really think about what they need and get the
Mm,
help they need. And so
yes,
as leaders, it's hard. We have to kind of be on the lookout for who needs what in our,
yes.
we're all humans, but having that permission slip to be human and to say, okay, today I've got kids,
I'll tell my
teachers
team
meetings.
too, if they wanna have therapy on working time, if they have set up, just let me know that they're not gonna be available for time, and I'm open to that for any of my team, because it has been a rough couple of
Mhm.
years. Everybody works really hard on my team. They're so good, and if they need that, that's fine.
That's great. And see, that's what's so powerful, and that's why you're growing because you've got a great culture and you've got a consistent culture that you're growing with your people. So, as we close out on this section on just thinking about you're a working mom and all the challenges, and why are you so passionate about this? And I know you started a kind of talking about this over the last few years with a group of people, but what do you think was the driver there that said, I've got to talk about this with other women, other females in the workplace.
Yeah, I think it's because at that time it wasn't talked about, and it's hard. It's hard. And,
Mhm.
working moms a lot of time feel like they're failing at everything. And there's just, there's no way to do it all. There's not. I remember I
Yeah.
used to ask, I've told this story before, but my dad has a cousin who's like Ivy League educated. She's beautiful. She's the CMO. She's a lawyer. I mean, she's like everything on paper. And when I was younger, I really wanted to be her. And I would be like, how do you do it with like your children? And she would kind of skirt around the question and just be like, oh, you do the best you can. And I never understood why she wouldn't give me a concrete answer until I
Mm.
had kids of my own and working. And it's because
Mhm.
there's not an answer. It is a
Mm-mm.
balance. And you have to have people. I mean, I'm so fortunate because my husband is amazing and we share the duties in the house, we share what we do
Mhm.
with the kids. Um,
That's
and
awesome.
so I also am lucky because, I have both sides of my kids' grandparents are nearby. But
That's awesome.
I think if you don't have, either a husband who's supportive or don't have a husband or don't have grandparents nearby, I think people do need to show you some grace. And I think, if you have to run and go do something for your kid, like I was saying before about like, if you have a doctor's appointment, go. If you have to go do something for your kid,
Mhm.
go. And I think I'm passionate about it because I don't feel like that's how the workplace has been for years. It's sort
Yeah.
of been like you're supposed to work, forget you have kids, which is not
Yeah.
possible, you know?
No.
And then when you're a mom, forget about work, which is also not possible. So it
Right.
really is. And so I feel very blessed because as an entrepreneur, I do, I get to make the choices of, all right, no, I'm going to focus on my kids right now and I'm going to do this, or I'm going to focus on work and close the door and hope that my kids don't come in.
Yeah.
But I just think it needed to be talked about because it is so difficult and it wasn't talked about before.
And I think that's such a great point is sometimes seeing what is relevant in the marketplace right now and what is it that I'm experiencing, how can I help other people with that?
Mhm.
It's kind of like what you did with your business, right? As you were figuring out your niche and
Yeah.
what are you ready to serve and how can you serve them and what experience do you have? So let's move into marketing and talk about marketing.
Yeah.
Because I think you and I were talking in the green room just about how hard it is right now to market yourself if you don't have help, right? If you don't have, because things are changing so rapidly.
Yeah.
And if you're not an expert in certain channels in certain areas, it's like, whoa. And just
Yeah.
how do you stay upskilled in that? And what are your recommendations for
Yeah.
entrepreneurs and other people?
It's moving so quickly. So, for starters, I try to just read as much as possible. But the honest truth is, in our agency, we have subject matter experts that are in certain areas. So, we train each other as well.
That's great.
Um, yeah, we have to because it's impossible to be an expert in all areas. And so, a lot of areas in
Hmm.
digital marketing touch each other. So, you have to at least know high level what's going on. But for us, it's the people that are in a certain area have to stay up on. I mean, that's part of it. Like, yes, you have to do the work well for clients, but you have to stay up to date. And it's funny. One of our SEO guys is always like teaching me. He loves to like, he'll be like, Google says this now. So he constantly is telling me what's going on. And I'm like, all right, thanks for letting me know.
That's
But I
great.
don't think you can be a good digital marketer without staying up to date of what's going on and taking
The
classes, truthfully.
Yeah, and the term you said taking classes, and I think that's the one thing is the leader we are today, the marketer we are today is not going to be who we need to be next year. So how
Mhm.
do we upskill? And what are the
Yeah.
trends? And what are we who knew that AI would take off like it did last year?
Mhm.
That was a kind of a pivot.
Yeah.
So what are your recommendations for AI and how do you keep your team and your clients trained in that and how to use it and how not to use it?
Yeah. So AI is great. Initially I was kind of skeptical, but once you know how to
Mhm.
use it, it can actually really help with efficiencies. I would just say everybody has to kind of go slow with it, test it out, see how things are working. Um, for what the biggest thing I always say, and I say this to my team and I say this to everyone that I'm talking to, is garbage in, garbage out. So
Mhm.
where ChatGPT helps me, for example, is I have all the ideas in my head and I just like literally give ChatGPT, like, here's everything. But the ideas come from me and I do a
Right.
lot of work on the front end. And then it spits something out that then you work with and you edit and whatever else. Right. And so it's an efficiency. It makes it a little bit faster than if I were to write it myself. But if I don't give it good ideas, it's not spitting out anything that's useful.
Right.
So that's the biggest thing that I think people don't understand is that you have to feed it for then it to
Mhm.
give you something. Then you have to edit it because it's not always accurate. And with marketing and branding, tonality is so important. So you have to make sure, are you giving it good direction up front with that as well? Like, what brand are you, when I'm talking to it and I'm writing a blog, I try to keep it somewhat informal, but not super informal. So you have to make sure that it's doing what you need it to do and it's matching back for what you're looking for. So I think AI is great, but I also think everyone should also take a class on that. And speaking on what I talked about earlier is that someone from my team did take an AI class and we're having a lunch and learn with the rest of the team where she's going to explain her findings. Now, of course, we're going to need
That's
to have
great.
another one shortly thereafter because it changes so quickly, but we will. And it's super important that, we're all up to date on all the changes.
I think that's a great point I want to make to our audience today is who are the people? I always talk about have your own personal board of directors around you, and they have expertise in things you don't have, and
Mhm.
you can call on them at any point for expertise. So who are those people around your table that are the digital marketing experts, that are the AI experts, that are the SEO? Who are the people around you that you, if you don't have a team like you have, Elise, that you can call upon and that can be constantly studying and be the expert? And I think so many times we hear about confidence as female leaders and asking for help.
Mhm.
And sometimes, if especially if we have in our strengths activator and achiever, we just want to get it done and check it off. And sometimes taking the moment to ask that person and to share. So I love how y'all are doing shared knowledge with your team and helping them each find an area that they can kind of own and be the subject
Mhm.
matter expert. But I think you don't have to have a marketing agency to do that. You can find those people unless you need that expertise on an ongoing, like you need with your clients, then get a marketing agency like you. But I think that's something that it sounds like you provide to your clients that a lot of agencies don't have. So I appreciate that about what you're telling me that you have as a marketer.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I've spent the last 9 years like really just growing the team to be the subject matter experts that we need. And it changes, but um, I said this earlier, I love my team. They
That's
are
great.
so good at their craft that it makes my job a lot easier. So
Well, and it probably helps them feel better because they know that they're being valued and they're doing meaningful work and
mhm.
they're being valued for the work that they own.
Yeah.
So that's a big piece of it.
Yeah.
So, one of the things I'm curious about as you look to the future and you look to planning, what is your strategy when you're planning? A lot of people are in the planning mode right now. It's almost the end of the year, and they're getting ready to think about how they're going to do things to be more effective in 2024 as a
Yeah.
company or as an organization. What are the tips that you found that have been helpful for you?
Um, well, from a marketing standpoint, everyone should have their plan already set for next year. So if they don't,
Absolutely.
that's something that, doing a review of the year before, years before, if you have an agency, do it with them. If you don't, really honing in on what worked, what didn't, what could you tweak? Do you need to help, to bring in help? From a team perspective, we just had a trainer come in and do some team. So our team is there's a lot of us who've been with the agency for quite a while, almost since the beginning, which is awesome. But then we've been growing, so we have a lot of new people. So the point of it was to do and we did these fun activities. We had a spirit week. It was great. But one of the days we had a trainer come in and kind of do fun exercises with us. So we had a good time, but it was all about trust and communication. And
Mm,
that's something that I plan on continuing as we grow to do different sessions like these to make sure that everybody, is comfortable with each other. For us, we have the creative side, the strategy side, but they need to work together really, really well. And
mhm.
that's why we're in the office 4 days a week is because
That's great.
we can all work together and brainstorm things, and be creative together. And it's a little bit easier in person than not in person. Um, Sorry, I went off topic a tiny bit, but I guess one of the things that I'm planning for next year again is to make sure that we're working as a good unit together. And I think having someone come in and work with us was really helpful.
And that's the key, I think, is how do you have a high performing team and how are you constantly helping upskill them and be their best? And it sounds like that's exactly what you're doing. So I applaud you for bringing in trainers and facilitators and building a culture where they feel like they're growing and learning every year. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
S- So as we get ready to close down, as you think about that entrepreneur that's just getting started, like you were 9 years ago,
Yeah.
or that female leader in the workplace, what has been helpful for you? Mentors, people that you've had around you to help you grow. What do you think has been the most helpful that you found tip that you would give these folks?
Yeah. So when you're starting out, the two pieces of advice that I got that I always think about and I always share. One is if you're going to, do the business, don't half-ass it. Sorry, excuse my language, but like
Hmm.
really go for it.
Yeah.
which is something I think sometimes entrepreneurs and women in general are kind of like, maybe I'll just kind of dabble here. And it's like, no, if you want to make this into a business, there's no dabbling, like get in there and make it
Mm-hmm.
happen. The other thing, and this might just be more for a marketing agency, but everybody needs business or clients. I was told before I left my job to get a couple clients ahead of time. And so if you can do that, so I
Mm-hmm.
wound up, once I left my job, I had a couple small clients, but at least kind of hit the ground running. Um, the other piece of advice that I would give anyone is just surround yourself with good people. And I don't even just mean, yeah, I've mentioned how many times through this interview how much I love my team, but I am really, really lucky because I have my parents I can go to for advice. I have a husband who's supportive. I have great friends in my life, so I think it's so important. As I've grown, a lot of my clients have become mentors to me. A lot of them that have
That's
been in the
great.
entrepreneurial world for years before I even started have kind of taken me under their wing. So I do think that that's a crucial piece of having a business is all people, all touch point, and in life, honestly,
Mm-hmm.
too. But for sure
Mm-hmm.
I could not have done any of my business without my team, my family, my friends. So that's a crucial piece as well.
And that's a great message. I love you definitely getting a few people under your belt before you launch, but get that team around you. Get that kind of virtual board of directors around you,
For sure.
and as I love how you said, just don't get in there halfway. Go in all
Yeah.
in.
Yeah.
And one of the best tips I heard was, hire for where you're gonna be instead of where you are right now. And it sounds
Yes,
like that's what you've been doing.
for sure.
So I applaud you for that. So, Elise, as we get ready to close out, is there anything I didn't ask you that you want to share with the group today? Anything that's coming up for you that you'd like to share as we close down?
Um, I don't know. I just got my CFE, so that was exciting.
Wow,
So I'll have that graduation coming up at the IFA National Convention.
that's
Um,
great.
which was funny because I have my MBA, but it was from 2009. So this was like, I was like, oh, hey, something exciting. That's another thing I think
Yeah.
is important is, yeah, I kept talking about like keep reading and everything, but I think, you don't need a designation necessarily, but like, we went into a new field. So I went all in for that as well and got the CFE so I could make sure that I'm an expert in that area as well. So
And the CFE, can you tell the audience what that stands for?
sure, certified franchise executive.
Yeah. So who knew 5 years, 9 years ago
Right.
when you were building your business that you were going to have this distinction? But the big message I think I want people to take from here is take that opportunity to grow and learn with your clients and be,
For sure.
yeah. And now you're talking their language. You get it. You understand, and you took the time to learn and do that in the midst of raising kids and managing all that you do.
Yeah.
So
Fun.
thank you so much, Elise, for being here today and sharing your tips and helping other entrepreneurs think about what they need to do to continue to grow and just really having that mindset of all in and taking care of your team and growing and learning yourself and role modeling that for those around you. So we appreciate you being here today and thank
Thank
you
you.
so much.
Thank you so much for
Okay.
having me. I appreciate it. It was fun.
Sure. Thank you.
You have been listening to Dominate Your Day podcast. If you're ready to transform your life and workplace from the inside out, go to danawilliamsco.com and set up a discovery call. We would love to connect with you and equip you with some helpful resources. Thank you for listening today, and please take a moment to subscribe to Dominate Your Day wherever you listen.